want to touch on the topic of the far right, because it seems as though Russia has become the, as titled in one of the papers, the promised land of the French far right. And if so, why? How, explain that.
First of all, I think that the extreme right has always been very interested in the capacity of the Russian people to maintain their traditions, and I would say the specificities of Russian culture, even at the times of the Soviet Union. There's this feeling on the extreme right that the Russian people is really so strong that they have succeeded in keeping their faith, their Christian faith, and in retaining many of their customs in spite of communism. And the extreme right is very impressed by the capacity of the Russian people to stay true to the traditions of the West, while they say at the same time that Western Europe is in a state of decay. So they mostly oppose Russia as the driving force that succeeds in keeping the Western values alive, and at the same time the extreme right is describing France and other Western countries as countries with no future, no hope of retaining this past and those customs.
Tradition. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that's the first reason why they I would say,
they're comfortable.
Are at least comfortable with Russia. It's not a matter of Putin or not Putin. It's about the Russian people. Mm-hmm. And in a forthcoming book, I will have an article about those French volunteers who fought alongside the Nazis in Russia and what is now Belarus during the Second World War. So you had thousands of French volunteers fighting alongside the Germans against the USSR. And some of them spent 2.5, 3 years on the Eastern Front fighting the communists and fighting the Red Army. And they left a lot of books of souvenirs, memoir. And what is really interesting, what I've tried to describe in this article, in that at the same time they were fighting the Red Army and they really hated communism. And the reason why they enlisted was this hatred of communism. But they came to know the Russian people, those, I would say, average Russian people living in the small villages. And they were very impressed by the fact that for most of those villagers, why it was like the Russian Revolution did not abolish anything except private property. They still clung to the old values, and so they were some kind of fascinated by the Russian people. The second point is that, especially after 1945, the French extreme right, as in many other countries, very much despised everything American, because America was associated with the defeat of the Axis, the defeat of the Vichy regime, and I mean it's also kind of a hatred against America, and what the extreme right says is the end of, in some way, the end of Western civilization. So when you hate America, and it's the Cold War era, you cannot support the USSR, of course, because you belong to the extreme right, so you're also very anti-communist. But when the USSR collapses, obviously, your opinion can change quite quickly. The extreme right in all countries in Europe very much stands against any kind of unilateral order in international relations. So they stand.
They stand against any kind of unilateral.
Yes,
Yeah.
against NATO in the United States being the only power in the world with the military capacity to tell the French or Italian or other people what to do. So starting not in the years immediately following the collapse of the USSR, because obviously Yeltsin was not their man, but as soon as Vladimir Putin became president, both the style of the man and the fact that Russia became some kind of a counterpower to NATO and America was met with, how to say, some feeling of revenge on everything that happened at the end of the Second World War.
Going all the way back there, that was still...
Going all the way back there, because many people, not the voters, but those activists on the extreme right, really belong to a tradition that sometimes is passed on from generation to generation. So maybe their grandparents had something to do with one or another political party of extreme right in the 1930s or 1940s, and they were raised in this state of mind that, the so-called liberation was in fact the end of the world.
That was sort of like a turning point.
That was a turning point, but what I want to really
Emphasize.
say is that obviously the reason why the extreme right supports Vladimir Putin and the regime in Russia is not because of money. Money is something very important, and when the National Front, for example, gets money from a Russian bank in order to finance their political campaigns, of course, money is important. But why would the Russian give money to a political party polling around 20% if it were not for ideas? And I mean, it goes both ways. The Russian state certainly believes that today the National Front is the closest to the kind of political model they think is fit, both for Russia and for Europe. And on the other hand, not only does the French National Front is happy about receiving money, of course, but they also think that the model of Russia is something that they should adapt to Western Europe in terms of family values, strong leadership, opposition to Islamism, opposition to America, opposition to NATO, patriotism, and so on. So it's mostly about ideas, and it's because they have common ideas that the money can flow, not the other way around.